I'm about to say what no one else is willing to say out loud. The Indiana Fever front office isn't just making questionable moves, they're following a pattern. And that pattern is raising serious concerns about the future of Caitlin Clark and the identity of this team. This isn't random mismanagement. Real incompetence looks chaotic: bad draft picks, messy contracts, poor timing. What's happening here feels different. It's structured. It's calculated. Every move over the past week connects, like pieces of a bigger plan that fans are only now starting to recognize. And here's the unsettling part. That plan appears to be reshaping Caitlin Clark's role in ways that strip away what makes her special. We're talking about one of the most dominant offensive forces women's basketball has ever seen. Her vision, her range, her control of tempo, and somehow, those strengths are being minimized instead of maximized. When you step back and look at the full timeline, it doesn't feel accidental. It feels deliberate, like a blueprint designed not to build around a superstar, but to contain her, to make her fit into a system instead of building the system around her. This is where things get uncomfortable. Because if this trend continues, it won't just affect performance, it could fracture the connection between the team and its fan base. And that's a risk no franchise should be willing to take.
The WNBA becomes more of a clown show. Seriously. They got handed a golden goose in Caitlin Clark that literally has been turned into a new CBA where they're all actually earning a little scratch. You got players out there running their mouths about fans over their money. You've got a front office in the Indiana Fever's front office that seems completely clueless right now. You're drafting in a player that just drowned the fan base.
Let's slow this down and walk through it carefully, because when you line up the timeline, the questions only get louder. Day 1. Free agency opens. The Indiana Fever step into the offseason with maximum flexibility. The salary cap is wide open. The roster is nearly a blank slate. Only 3 core names are locked in: Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and a young supporting piece. This is a rare position for any franchise: complete creative control. They have the resources to build a system perfectly tailored around Clark's generational offensive skill set: shooting range, pace control, and elite playmaking. So what's the first move? Not a dominant forward to complement Boston in the paint. Not a long, defensive wing to stretch the floor and protect Clark on the perimeter. Instead, they bring in another point guard. A ball handler. The same position where Clark thrives most. It's a choice that immediately raises eyebrows, not because adding depth is wrong, but because of what it prioritizes. On a blank canvas, the first stroke is direct overlap with your franchise centerpiece. Days 2 through 5 feel far more predictable. The Fever retain key contributors like Kelsey Mitchell, Lexi Hall, and Sophie Cunningham. Continuity matters, and these moves suggest stability. The roster keeps its familiar shape. Fans start to settle. Maybe that first signing was just about depth. Maybe it's insurance, not a shift in philosophy. Then comes Day 6 draft night. With the 10th pick, expectations are clear. This is where you add size, versatility, or defense. A frontcourt presence. A wing who can guard multiple positions. Someone who complements both Clark and Boston. The need isn't subtle, it's obvious. Instead, the name called is Raven Johnson, another guard. At that point, it's no longer just a single decision. It's a pattern. Multiple additions at the same position as your primary star. And not just any player, but one whose history with Clark is already widely known from high-profile college moments that captured national attention. That context adds another layer. Out of all the available prospects, frontcourt players, defensive anchors, versatile wings, the Fever go in a direction that intensifies scrutiny instead of easing it. Now, to be clear, none of these moves alone prove a grand strategy to sideline Clark. Teams add guards for many reasons: pace, depth, injury protection, lineup flexibility. But when similar decisions stack up in a short window, it naturally invites interpretation. And that's where the real tension lies. Not in one move, but in the sequence. Because when fans connect those dots, they don't just see roster building. They see intent.
That's what you have going on right here with Lynn Dunn. I love this. The 4 types of complainers. And it's got all these corporate jargon, bullshit definitions that somebody put snipped out of some article somewhere. And she posted this on her social media. It's a clear shot at the Indiana Fever fan base. Talks about the productive complainer, the venting complainer, the chronic complainer, the malicious complainer. This person needs to be removed. They complain about everything.
If you think the draft pick was the real shock, you're missing the bigger picture. The real turning point came in the 48 hours that followed, and almost no one in mainstream coverage is breaking it down. Right after the draft, Stephanie White steps to the microphone. She's asked about the guard rotation, and her response immediately shifts the conversation. First, she labels Raven Johnson a true point guard. Second, she describes Caitlin Clark as someone who can play both on and off the ball. Third, she frames the surplus of guards as a way to manage minutes for Kelsey Mitchell. Individually, those comments might seem harmless. Together, they create a very different message. At no point does she clearly state that Clark is the undisputed primary ball handler or that the offense will run through her. Instead, the language leans toward flexibility almost to the point of redefining roles. In that moment, a generational playmaker is framed less as the system itself and more as a piece within it. Now, step back and look at this through a modern basketball lens. The idea of a true point guard has evolved significantly. When you have a high-usage, heliocentric star players like Luka Doncic or LeBron James, the offense naturally flows through them. Their value comes from constant on-ball decision-making, collapsing defenses, and creating advantages every possession. Clark fits that mold. Her assist numbers, vision, and scoring gravity aren't just strengths, they're the engine. Shifting that dynamic, even slightly, changes how defenses react. If another non-elite shooting guard initiates the offense, defenses can adjust by sagging, clogging lanes, and putting more pressure on interior players like Aaliyah Boston. That doesn't automatically mean failure, but it does introduce risk. Then comes the next layer. Within 24 hours, team executive Kelly Krauskopf speaks publicly and emphasizes that Clark will need to adjust to the new roster. That word stands out, because typically, systems are built to maximize a franchise cornerstone, not the other way around. Again, there are reasonable interpretations. Adjustment can mean growth, expanded versatility, or shared responsibility. But in the context of everything that just happened, the signings, the draft, the coach's comments, it reinforces the same underlying theme: redistribution of control. None of this proves a deliberate effort to sideline Clark. Teams experiment, coaches adapt, and front offices think long-term. But when messaging, roster construction, and timing all point in a similar direction, it's natural for fans to question what the final vision really is. And at that point, the conversation shifts from individual decisions to organizational philosophy.
I'm telling you, I got sent this by Evelyn DR right here. She sent me this on Monday before the draft. Raven Johnson signed a multi-year deal with Adidas. Right here. For them shoes. Yikes. Talk about clown show shoes. Anyway, for those shoes. There is not a world where you will convince me that Raven John.
Then comes the moment that takes this from basketball decisions into something far more emotional. A respected figure, championship winning, decades in the game, someone Caitlin Clark herself has publicly admired, steps into the conversation and responds to growing fan concerns. Instead of engaging with the substance, the response dismisses the criticism outright, framing parts of the fan base as negative, disruptive, even harmful to team culture. That reaction lands hard. Not because disagreement is unusual, but because of what it signals. At a time when fans are raising detailed, basketball-focused questions about roster construction and offensive identity, they feel brushed aside rather than heard. The tone matters, and here, it creates distance. The situation escalates when Erica Wheeler adds fuel to the fire, making comments that come across as dismissive of everyday fans. Now, it's no longer just one voice. It's multiple layers of the organization: coaching, leadership, veteran presence, all contributing to a narrative that feels increasingly disconnected from the audience supporting the team. And through all of this, one thing never gets clearly stated. No one steps forward to deliver a simple, unifying message that Clark remains the central engine, the primary decision-maker, the player the system is built around. That absence doesn't go unnoticed. In fact, it becomes the loudest statement of all. This is where the deeper debate begins. Because what's emerging isn't just about individual moves, it's about philosophy. The Indiana Fever appear to be shaping a system-first identity under Stephanie White. A style built on defensive intensity, positional flexibility, and shared ball-handling responsibilities. It's structured, disciplined, and team-oriented. That approach has proven effective in other contexts. But the question is whether it aligns with the unique strengths of a player like Clark. She isn't a conventional piece you plug into a balanced system. She's a high-usage, offense-driving force, the kind of player who bends defenses, dictates tempo, and elevates everyone around her precisely because the ball runs through her hands. When that kind of player is asked to adapt into a more distributed framework, it creates tension. Not necessarily failure, but friction between identity and execution. And that's the real concern fans are circling. Not whether the system can work, but whether it's the right system for the talent at the center of it all.
Oh my God! Raven Johnson was available and we just couldn't pass up such a talent. Well, the team needs bigs, so badly, and you had bigs on the board. Somebody sent me a list of 4 bigs yesterday. I'd put every one of them on the team. Monsters. Literally sent me 4 Camila Cardosos. We're talking 6'4" and up. Beast. Just in there clogging up the middle to take passes from Caitlin Clark and put it in a bucket. Catch, shoot, receive, pass, shoot, drop in bucket. Nah. Let's bring in another guard. Another mother bleeping guard.
The roster construction only intensifies the debate. When you zoom out and look at the full picture, the questions become harder to ignore. If your franchise centerpiece is Caitlin Clark, a high-usage playmaker who thrives with the ball in her hands, then every roster decision should clearly reinforce that identity. Instead, the Indiana Fever have added multiple guards players who naturally operate in the same space. That doesn't automatically make the strategy wrong, but it does shift the structure. Depth at guard can be valuable, especially after injury-heavy seasons. Still, when those additions stack up, free agency plus the selection of Raven Johnson, it signals a move toward a more shared, flexible backcourt rather than a singular offensive hub. At the same time, there are opportunity costs. Roster spots and contract protections are limited. Reports and discussions around frontcourt depth highlight how difficult those trade-offs can be. Stretch forwards and interior size are often critical complements to players like Clark and Aaliyah Boston, particularly for spacing and interior balance. When those areas feel less emphasized, it naturally feeds the perception that priorities are shifting. But to understand the full picture, you have to acknowledge the counterargument, and it's a strong one. Boston herself has publicly pushed back on the growing tension, emphasizing that internal chemistry is often very different from external narratives. Her point is simple: relationships evolve, and early concerns don't always reflect long-term reality. That perspective carries weight, especially given her own experience integrating into the team. Then there's Johnson, who by all accounts has handled the spotlight professionally. Her comments about Clark have been respectful and team-focused, with no indication of personal friction. From a purely basketball standpoint, her resume is legitimate defensive impact, big game experience, and proven competitiveness. After a season where injuries tested guard depth, adding another capable ball handler can be justified on paper. And that's where the situation becomes complicated. A move can make basketball sense and still create tension in perception. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Because ultimately, this isn't just about who was added, it's about how those moves were communicated. Messaging shapes interpretation. When decisions aren't clearly tied back to a central vision, especially one involving a star of Clark's profile, uncertainty fills the gap. That's what's driving the reaction. Not just the picks, not just the signings, but the alignment between them and the public explanations surrounding them. So the real question isn't whether the Fever made defensible basketball decisions. It's whether those decisions and the way they were presented have created a disconnect between organizational intent and fan understanding.
They could sit back and relate to what Caitlin Clark's going through and her game, and how she should be used. It's crazy. First step, attack fans. I've seen this so much over the last decade. Entertainment, ESPN, media. Let's attack the patrons. That's not real smart. That's not a great idea. Tell me what you think. I'm not spending a dime. Not a dime on the W, not a dime on the team. It is not going to happen.
At the heart of this debate is a clash of beliefs. There's a growing perception that Stephanie White prioritizes her defensive, system-driven philosophy above any single player. That Kelly Krauskopf values long-term franchise identity over building around one star. And that Lynn Dunn expects fans to trust the organization without questioning its direction. Whether or not those interpretations are fair, they've taken hold because of how recent decisions and messaging have been received. And they collide directly with another undeniable reality, the impact of Caitlin Clark on the Indiana Fever. Before Clark's arrival, the franchise struggled for visibility and results. Since then, attention, revenue, and expectations have surged dramatically. Attendance has climbed, national broadcasts have increased, and the team has become a central storyline in the league. That kind of transformation is rare, and it naturally shapes how fans view every roster move and coaching decision. From that perspective, many believe the logical path is simple: maximize what makes Clark special. Her ability to control tempo, create shots, and elevate teammates isn't just a strength, it's the identity. When decisions appear to distribute that control more broadly, it raises concerns about whether the team is leaning away from its most effective formula. At the same time, organizations often think in broader terms. Building depth, emphasizing defense, and creating lineup flexibility are all legitimate strategies, especially over a long season. The tension comes from how those priorities interact with a player whose style is built on high usage and constant involvement. Now, with training camp approaching, speculation is about to give way to reality. Roles will become clearer, rotations will take shape, and the on-court product will reveal far more than press conferences or interviews ever could. The central question is straightforward. Will the Fever structure their offense with Clark as the primary initiator on most possessions, or will they lean into a more distributed system with multiple ball handlers sharing responsibility? Neither approach is inherently wrong, but each leads to a very different version of the team. Fans are paying close attention, and reactions are strong because expectations are high. That's what happens when a franchise moves into the spotlight so quickly. Every decision carries more weight. Every message is amplified. Ultimately, this isn't just about one player or one philosophy. It's about alignment between talent, system, and communication. If those pieces come together, the Fever have the potential to be one of the most compelling teams in the league. If not, the conversation you're seeing now will only grow louder as the season unfolds.